Okay, let's dive straight into a really critical global challenge. The mounting pressure on our clean water supply.
Mm-hmm.
It's driven by, well, a growing population, expanding industries,
Mm-hmm.
and one sector in particular, the textile industry, really demands our attention for its significant water use and pollution.
That's right. And the projections are quite stark, actually. By, around 2050, textile consumption is expected to just skyrocket.
Right.
And this will likely lead to a parallel surge in the need for water and energy, plus a growing stream of chemical discharge and waste. It presents a really significant environmental hurdle.
Yeah, a huge hurdle. And right at the heart of this is the very colorful issue of wastewater, especially from textile dyeing. So today we're zeroing in on disperse dyeing and the pressing need for more effective and, frankly, more affordable cleanup methods.
Exactly, because the traditional approaches, things like solvent extraction, ion exchange, precipitation, evaporation, they have their place, sure. But they can be costly and maybe not always as efficient as we'd hope, particularly for tackling certain persistent pollutants. General techniques can sometimes struggle with specific impurities.
Okay, so that's where the innovation comes in.
Precisely. Here's where it gets fascinating, because we're going to explore an innovative set of solutions known as advanced oxidation processes, or AOPs.
AOPs, got it.
Think of these as a more sophisticated, maybe more powerful way to break down unwanted substances. And the particular method we're putting under the microscope today is ozonation.
Ozonation, okay, sounds almost futuristic. But before we get into how ozone works its magic, maybe we should understand why this colored wastewater is such a big deal. What exactly is disperse dyeing, and why is it so common?
Yeah, good question. Disperse dyeing is a really, really important process, mainly because of how much we use polyester fiber.
Ah, polyester. Okay.
It's everywhere, isn't it? Home furnishings, our clothes, even in technical textiles for industrial uses. It's so popular because it's pretty economical to produce.
Right, cost effective.
And it has excellent properties, good strength, resistance to chemicals, heat stability. It just makes it a very versatile material for textiles.
Okay, so polyester is the workhorse, and disperse dyeing is key to coloring it. Now, let's bring in this potential solution. Ozone. You said ozonation. What exactly is ozone, and what gives it these impressive pollutant-fighting abilities?
Okay, so think of ozone as a sort of supercharged version of the oxygen we breathe. Regular oxygen, O2, right? 2 oxygen atoms.
Yeah.
Ozone is O3. It has 3 oxygen atoms.
Okay.
And that extra oxygen atom makes it incredibly reactive. It's a really potent oxidizing agent.
Meaning it likes to react with stuff, break things down.
Exactly. Its ability to break down other molecules through oxidation is measured by its oxidation potential, which is quite high. You might see the number 2.07 electron volts.
Okay, quite technical, but high is good here.
High is good. It basically tells us how strongly ozone can grab onto and dismantle other molecules. A higher number means it's a more aggressive and effective pollutant destroyer.
So it's like a supercharged oxygen molecule ready to take apart unwanted chemicals.
Precisely. And this supercharged molecule has some really impressive credentials when it comes to wastewater treatment. For instance, studies have shown it can achieve very high color removal rates. The research we're focusing on today reports up to 99% color removal.
99%? That's huge.
It is. But the advantages go beyond just, making the water look clear again.
Tell me more. Why is this good for the environment and maybe for the businesses involved?
Well, environmentally, ozone is a winner because it can significantly cut down on the need for harsh chemicals in the treatment process. And here is a really crucial benefit. It doesn't leave behind problematic waste products.
Oh, how does that work?
It just naturally breaks down, decomposes into regular oxygen, O2 again.
Ah, very neat. So no sludge or anything?
Generally, no sludge formation, which is a major headache with some other methods. From an economic and practical view, this makes it really appealing across various industries: wood pulp, food processing, odor control, and, of course, water and wastewater treatment. It's even used to disinfect our drinking water.
That's a pretty broad and impressive track record.
Yeah.
But I remember reading it can't be stored or transported easily. Why is that?
That's right. Ozone is quite unstable. It degrades pretty quickly, so you have to generate it right where you need it. It's called in situ production.
On-site. Makes sense.
Physically, yeah, it's a pale blue gas, quite reactive, heavier than air. Its instability just means we need to make it on demand.
Okay, on-site production. How do they actually make it then at an industrial level? Is it complicated?
The 2 main industrial methods are actually quite elegant, I think. The first uses ultraviolet light specifically UV light at a wavelength of about 185 nanometers.
UV light, like the sun, but specific.
Kind of, yeah. Imagine the specific type of UV light hits a regular oxygen molecule, O2, and it has enough energy to split it into two separate, highly reactive single oxygen atoms.
Okay.
These individual atoms then very quickly bump into other O2 molecules and combine to form ozone, O3.
So the light itself forces the change. That's neat. What's the other main method?
The second common technique is called corona discharge.
Corona discharge.
Yeah, think of it like creating a miniature controlled lightning storm.
Whoa, okay.
You apply a high voltage to a metallic grid that's placed between two insulating materials, dielectrics. This high voltage essentially jumps across the gap, creating a corona, and in that process, it energizes the oxygen gas that's flowing through, converting some of it into ozone.
Like nature's way, but harnessed.
Exactly. It's quite similar to how ozone is naturally generated during thunderstorms, and this corona discharge method is very common in labs and industry.
Fascinating. Nature lending us a cleaning mechanism. Now let's really focus on the specific research study you mentioned. What exactly were the scientists trying to find out, and how did they set it up?
So the main goal of this particular research was to investigate how effective ozone could be at removing the color from real wastewater, specifically wastewater coming from a textile dye house right after the disperse dyeing process.
Okay, so real-world samples.
Yes, they got actual wastewater samples from a collaborating dye house that used a specific recipe for disperse dyeing.
In this recipe, what kind of stuff was in this colored wastewater they were testing?
Well, the recipe, which is detailed in their paper, lists the precise chemicals and dyestuffs used. For this experiment, the mix included things like a dispersing agent, acetic acid,
Okay.
and then specific disperse dyes, synchron yellow, synchron red, and synchron navy blue, all in very specific amounts per liter of water. So a very precisely made, colorful wastewater sample.
A specific and, I imagine, pretty vibrant mix. So they had the water, then what? How do they actually treat it with ozone?
They used a device called an ozone generator to produce the ozone gas.
Right, the on-site production.
Exactly. And this ozone gas was then carefully bubbled through a 400 milliliter sample of the wastewater. They put the sample in a beaker and used a diffuser, basically something to make lots of small bubbles to get good contact between the ozone and the water.
Okay, makes sense.
They kept the flow rate of the ozone gas consistent at 3 liters per minute, and then they ran the ozonation for 3 different lengths of time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and 30 minutes.
To see if longer treatment helped more.
Precisely. And importantly, they repeated each of these time trials 3 times.
For reliability.
Yep, to make sure their results were consistent and not just a fluke.
Okay, solid experimental design.
Mm-hmm.
How do they measure how well it worked? How do you quantify less color or cleaner water in this context?
Good question. They used a couple of key measurements. First, to get a handle on the overall level of organic pollution in the water, they used a standard lab method to measure the chemical oxygen demand, or COD.
Chemical oxygen demand, what does that tell you?
It basically measures how much oxygen would be needed to break down all the organic stuff in the water chemically. So a lower COD value means less organic pollution, cleaner water in that sense. It's measured in milligrams per liter.
Okay, lower COD is better.
Yeah.
What about the color itself?
For the color, they used a specialized instrument, a SpectraQuant Faro 300 spectrometer, to measure something called ADMI color removal values.
ADMI.
Yeah, ADMI. Think of it as a standardized scale to measure the intensity and shade of color in water. A higher ADMI number means more intense color. So the researchers were looking for a big drop in this ADMI value after the ozone treatment. They also measured simple absorbance at a specific wavelength, 510 nanometers, which corresponds to the color.
Right, so lower absorbance and lower ADMI means less color.
Got it.
Okay, the experiment is set up, the measurements are ready. What did they find? Did the ozone actually work?
The results were indeed quite promising. They clearly observed that as the ozonation time increased, going from 10 to 20 to 30 minutes, there was a definite reduction in both the color absorbance they reported. It dropped from about 1.23 initially down to around 0.595 after 30 minutes.
So less than half the original color intensity by absorbance.
Roughly, yes. And also the SADI values decreased. They started at about 520 milligrams per liter and went down to 3,100 after the 30-minute ozone treatment.
Okay, so a reduction there too, meaning less overall organic stuff, less color and less pollution sounds like a win. Did they show this visually?
They did. The paper includes photos referenced as Figure 7, which apparently provide a clear visual comparison. You can see the wastewater samples getting progressively lighter in color as the ozonation time increases from 0 up to 30 minutes.
Seeing is believing sometimes.
Absolutely. So, based on these findings, the drop in absorbance, the drop in SOT, the visual change, the study concluded that ozonation is, yes, a successful method for removing color from this specific type of dispersed dyeing wastewater.
That's really encouraging news for this particular corner of the textile industry. But what about the bigger picture? What are the broader implications or advantages of using ozone like this?
Well, the potential is quite considerable. Ozone isn't just good for these specific dyes. It's shown effectiveness against a whole range of tricky pollutants, things like aromatic hydrocarbons, some pesticides, phenols, chlorinated compounds.
Well, wider range.
Yes, and it's known for reducing cod in various types of dyeing wastewater, not just disperse. Plus, as we touched on, the study rightly highlights those big advantages.
Yeah.
No sludge generation, which is a huge practical benefit.
Right, avoiding a secondary waste problem.
Exactly. And it doesn't tend to create toxic breakdown products or metabolites. Looking ahead, the researchers even mentioned plans to investigate using ozonation, maybe even during the dyeing process, like in reactive dye baths, which could be even more efficient.
Interesting. So, okay, let's try to pull this together. We started with this big global issue, clean water scarcity, and saw how the textile industry, particularly dyeing, is a major contributor to the problem. Then we focused on this specific challenge, the colored wastewater from dispersed dyeing, which is used a lot for polyester. Traditional methods can be costly or not fully effective.
Right.
But this advanced oxidation process, ozonation, using this supercharged O3 molecule, seems to offer a really effective and, importantly, more environmentally friendly alternative.
That's the key takeaway.
The research we looked at showed significant color removal up to 99% and a reduction in overall pollution, the CO. Plus, the big environmental bonus of not creating sludge and breaking down into harmless oxygen.
Exactly. This kind of efficiency could really help dye houses reduce their environmental footprint, meet stricter regulations, potentially even save costs in the long run by avoiding sludge disposal fees and maybe reducing chemical use. It's a potential win-win.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It presents a really promising path towards cleaner textile manufacturing, better for the environment, potentially better for the business, bottom line, and ultimately, better for all of us needing clean water.
Well put. It addresses the problem at the source in a cleaner way.
This deep dive really makes you think, though. Given how effective ozone seems to be here for this specific industrial wastewater, what other tough industrial wastewater challenges could this kind of advanced oxidation process be applied to? You mentioned pesticides, phenols.
There's definitely potential in other sectors like pharmaceuticals, pulp and paper, maybe even agriculture runoff.
Right. And what further innovations, maybe in generating ozone more efficiently or applying it differently, could make these technologies even more accessible, more widespread? How do we get from promising research to common practice? Definitely something to keep an eye on and maybe something for you, the listener, to ponder as well.